The Braintree Democratic Town Committee welcomes Erez Hatch and Erin Heineman from Act on Mass. They will speak to us about the People's House campaign for transparency in state government. The Massachusetts Senate and the House pass rules at the beginning of each legislative session. While the Senate passed their rules in January, Speaker Mariano has delayed the vote on the House rules until July. Act on Mass is proposing 3 rules amendments. Erez will begin by telling us why the State House isn't working for us.
It should be, all of the democratic policies like healthcare, immigrant protection, same-day voter registration, all of these should be getting passed in our state house, right? Well, not exactly. All of these issues, many of them that are in the Democratic Party's platform, like immigrant protection, same-day voter registration, um, progressive taxation, preventing wage theft, single-payer health care, and even stuff like child marriage, which is absolutely crazy. None of this is getting passed in the state house.
Yeah, if I could jump in here for just a quick second, if you could move the X off of that, Eris, for a second, like move, yeah. So these, this graphic on the right of bills that have been in the State House but have not passed is really, like, that's a really important graphic to me, because things like the Safe Communities Act, right, that would provide immigrant protections, same-day voter registration has not passed because it's been, well, we'll talk about why, a little bit later in the presentation. It's pretty clear why, but, same-day voter registration and progressive taxation did get a win today, though. And it was a long, but we would say it was a long time coming. It was because it passed in the House today to be sent to the ballot in 2022. But yeah, which is amazing. But we would say that it took far too long. And the reason that I got so involved with Act on Mass is because the issue that's closest to my heart is single payer healthcare. Having had MS since I was 17 years old, I've spent my entire adult life with just basically needing to have good insurance, and that good insurance always being sort of always asking me for extra stuff, extra documentation. It's just like a nightmare to be working full time and to live with all of these hoops that you have to jump through just to get what your insurance company says you should get. And so single payer healthcare is very it's in session right now. It was brought to the session already, this session of the House. And so we think that bills, like all of these bills, the thing they have in common is that they're popular and that they deserve a vote on the House floor. And what keeps happening is that they go to these House committees and they get sent to study, which Erez will tell you about shortly. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, totally. So everything Erin said was completely true. And we're wondering why. Why does this legislation not get passed? Why are all of these bills, many of which have popular support from both voters and from the representatives themselves, why are they not passing in the state house? So our theory of what's going on is that everyday voters are getting locked out of the process. Ideally, we want a representative democracy where the voters elect representatives, and those representatives will pass legislation that they promised to us in their campaign. In reality, this isn't really happening. The voters are voting for representatives, and then from there, the representatives are going to committees and voting on bills behind closed doors where lobbying and corporate influence can get to them more easily, and that leads to weak representation on the part of the House of Representatives. And it essentially shuts out the voice of the people when it comes to the legislative process. But why is that happening? We think it's due to 2 large problems. There's a lack of transparency, and there's a very skewed concentration of power in the state house. So that first issue, the lack of transparency, is it's really something. According to the House rule book, the votes for bills in committee don't have to be published. So there are secretive votes and testimonies where bills die in committee, and the representatives' votes are not on the record, so you have no way of knowing if your representative voted for or against this bill that you're supporting. In addition to not disclosing committee testimonies and votes, there's also no time to review what legislation does come out of committees. There's only a 24-hour minimum before a law gets publicized. Sorry. Once a law gets publicized, there's a 24-hour minimum before it goes to a vote. And oftentimes, the laws getting published or coming out of committee get even less time than that. And it's absolutely ridiculous because legislators don't have time to read the bills. So that means that essentially the House leadership has the ability to stall bills that they don't like in committees without the constituents' knowledge. And then whatever they do like, they can ram through the House to a floor vote with little or no advance warning. And for more on this issue, I'm going to pass it right over to Evan.
Okay. Yeah, and just a little bit more about that last. We can stay on this slide, but one of the things that is happening in the House is in these committees, they're not voted adversely necessarily, although we don't know because we're the public. We're not really sure what's happening, but most of the time, these bills are given a study order. Okay, so it's called being sent to study. And this happens, I don't have the percentage, or as do you, but it's like, yeah.
I don't have the percentage either, but yeah, a large portion of these bills, instead of being killed outright, they're being sent to studies.
So you would think that somebody's going to study them and come back with lots of great information. And at least in the case of the single payer healthcare bill, there's never been a study done, and there's no budget for studies. So it is really just a euphemism to kind of get out of saying what they're really doing, which is killing the bills. But don't just take our word for it. I need to have the chat here. I got into full screen. Yeah, don't just take our word for it. So if you can see here, the Open States Project Scorecard graded us an F along with 3 other states. So, I mean, Massachusetts, like Era said at the beginning, where we think of ourselves and other states think of us as this very, progressive state and deep blue Massachusetts, et cetera, but we are not transparent whatsoever. And the Center for Public Integrity gave us a D+ in a 2015 investigation. But if you look below that, they actually gave us an F when it comes to public access to information because the House, actually all 3 branches of government, they're not subject to the same FOIA laws that other institutions would be. So it's, yeah, the transparency piece is pretty bad. But now I'm going to pivot to a second issue, and that's a concentration of power in the State House. And the first thing to note while you're looking at this is that while it's called the leadership, this group of people in the House acts more like management or an authority over the other representatives. So you see, we start. So let's start with the Speaker. The Speaker, he's considered to be the most powerful person in Massachusetts, not the governor, not the Senate president, but the Speaker of the House. And why is that? Because the House is part of the state government. The House is the part of the state government that controls the state budget. And the Speaker controls the House. So you can see all the things that the Speaker has at his disposal here: choosing leadership positions, committee chairs, and committee assignments, deciding which bills come to the floor, and controlling the amendment process. Party leaders and the Speaker pro tempore both work very closely with the Speaker, or all work very closely with the Speaker. And then the committee chairs decide which bills are voted on in committee. So they have incredible power over which bills are reported out and which ones are kept in or sent to study, which, as we know, the studies aren't happening. And then the rank and file reps don't have any special privileges. They can file, co-sponsor, and vote on bills. I think it's really interesting because when this is what really opened my eyes to the problem, because I've certainly called my representative about, things that I care about. And my representative has said great things. They're like, yeah, of course, I'm going to co-sponsor that. Or like, I'm going to vote for that. But rank and file reps don't have any power when it comes to, so they can say those things, but when it goes to the committee, they don't have any real anything to work with in terms of actually getting that done. And that's with like the lots of progressive bills. So let's see. What is the result of? So the result of all of this power is that the vast majority of Democratic representatives vote 90% to 100% the same way that the Speaker does. Every vote in the last decade has had the result of the Speaker, virtually always a conservative Democrat, a white man, and a white man. So you can go to the next slide. We're gonna do the video after.
Question comes on the adoption amendment. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The noes have it. The amendment is not adopted.
Yeah, this is how long. Even though they have a fancy little voting machine at every desk, and all they have to do is press a button, it's not that hard. But we can change it. Together, we have the power to hold our state reps accountable and demand more.
So this was very eye-opening to me. So the Speaker pressures reps. So those rank and file reps probably won't remain rank and file reps because there are rewards there are monetary rewards for getting some of the positions that the Speaker has the ultimate authority in doling out. So chairs get a $65,000 stipend. Party leaders get a $60K stipend. Oh wait, can you go back?
Yeah.
Okay. You can see all these stipends that can significantly improve a person's take-home salary. And so in this way, rank and file representatives really do not want to, rock the boat. You hear that a lot, and we've been hearing that a lot from various representatives that they don't want to rock the boat. And the reason is that they are they're rewarded for, kind of towing the party line. And like Erez mentioned, like it's normally like the more conservative Democrats that tend to be much more conservative than the broader electorate of Massachusetts, which tend to be a more progressive in terms of their sort of democratic tendencies. And there's also punishments. So, if reps can be they can be afraid to disobey the Speaker if they don't conform to the Speaker. So it's this pressure system of like rewards and punishments. And so reps they're afraid to disobey the Speaker, and they fear losing money and influence. Okay, so our grassroots solution, now that we've gotten you really depressed as to what has been happening in the State House, because it's really I think it's jaw-dropping. The first time I learned about all this, I was really shocked. But there is a grassroots solution to this. And you and sort of all of us can do to change the system. In essence, our campaign strategy is to model the kind of constituent-focused engagement that we think is like a sign of a healthy democracy. Like we saw what looked like an unhealthy democracy that Erez showed before. And that means elbowing our way into the system, cutting out all the obstacles to make our voices heard, and not only heard, but prioritized. So what we've been doing is we've been building district teams. Erez is the leader of the district team for Braintree, and so we're building district teams and across the state. So before, when it was in the fall, we were called the Transparency is Power campaign. We were only organizing in specific districts that we thought would be liable to these changes, but now we are organizing across the entire state. And so we are these are groups of constituents, and whether they're veteran activists or totally new to politics who care about this issue, and we train essentially constituents to how to have a meeting with their legislator, And there's been at this point, there's been so many meetings, and some of them have gone really favorably, and they've been great meetings. And in other meetings, you know, with representatives, what happens is constituents are kind of shocked to hear that their representative is not interested in, you know, rocking the boat, like I said. So yeah, like so recently, we've had a lot of accomplishments so far. I mean, it's June. Kathy, you mentioned before that the rules vote will be in July. It's going to be either I think it's either the 7th or the 14th, but it's going to be in early to mid July. So we're really in the final push of the campaign right now, just being in June. We have 3,000 signups to join district teams. We have 25 volunteer organizers like Erez and myself. And we have at least one volunteer in every district in the state. We have 20 public vote commitments. So that means representatives have committed publicly to those votes, and 4 people today just committed to voting for speaker term limits, which is a pretty brave thing to do considering all the power that the speaker has. There have been 71. I won't. I call this PowerPoint karaoke to my kids when I'm teaching, so I won't do that to you. But I won't read this all to you. But we have had victories. So the first victory is that the speaker said that no votes are going to be posted online. That's a small victory, because usually what happens is that their vote in the vote to approve and to like send the bill on, or vote no. And there's also abstaining from voting, and there's also votes that in various like electronic voting and things like that. We would like all votes to be made public, because they already are in the state Senate. They are already up on the website in the state Senate, and the state Senate moves at a faster pace than the House does. Let's see.
So pretty much the opposite of the federal government, where the House moves quickly and the Senate's like, whoa, hold your horses.
Asking for 3 things. We want to make all committee votes public, just the way they are in the state Senate. Ensure that bills are public for 72 hours before a vote, and there is a stipulation now for like emergency legislation. But in general, ensure all the bills are public 72 hours before a vote. And rule 3 is reinstate term limits for the speaker, and it's a really modest request. It's 8 years consecutively. There have been speakers of the House for other people probably know better than I do. There have been long-term speakers of the House, and that builds the concentration of power, and that builds that system where the speaker is holding on to power. And Speaker DeLeo is new. Speaker Mariano is new, but we just think that there should be a limit to the speakership. So here's what you can do. So we are here to answer questions as well in a minute, but I'm gonna put a link in the chat. Okay, I'm gonna put a link in the chat to our like sign up page and stuff, so you can join the district team and be present in the meetings with your representative, and also be updated about the campaign as well. And we can answer any questions that you have.